The yeas are 236. The nays are 181. The bill is passed.
Of course, that was Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Her chamber passed the historic enforcement reform bill, calling for a number of changes in the wake of renewed protests about police brutality. So we want to bring in Nancy Cordes, who's following along and can tell us how things are going. Nancy, I want to remind everyone that that's in the House. In the Senate, it was the Senate Democrats that blocked their Republican counterparts' effort to put forth a similar bill. They wouldn't even start debate on that bill. So tell us where we are now. We've got one bill passed in the House, floated by the Democrats, introduced by the Democrats. No surprise, it passed in the House. Another one that doesn't seem to be going anywhere in the Senate. Where do things stand?
We are standing in the middle of total gridlock, Anne-Marie. We're basically, yes, on one hand, protesters who have been out in the streets for weeks now can cheer the fact that a major police reform bill has passed in the House, but things look incredibly uncertain in the Senate. You have Democrats saying that the Republican bill is a fig leaf, that it's toothless, that it's not even worth debating. You've got Republicans firing back that Democrats just want to deny them a victory on this very important issue that they say both sides care about equally. And so it's really hard to see where the two sides go from here. Democrats say they want to negotiate first on this Republican bill, try to move it a little more in the direction they think it needs to go before they take it to the floor for a formal debate and a vote. Republicans say, no dice. You want to debate it, you want to talk about it, you want to change it, let's bring it to the Senate floor. Both sides are dug in, and I have to say, you know, this is a major disappointment for people who sort of saw the two sides in record time craft their own legislation and bring it to the forefront, that it doesn't look at this point like they are going to be able to craft a compromise anytime soon.
So, Nancy, our viewers may not be aware, but 3 Republican congressmen, Brian Fitzpatrick, Will Hurd, and Fred Upton, all crossed the aisle and voted with Democrats on this bill. I know that Congressman Hurd is retiring from Congress, the only black Republican in Congress. But what about the other 2?
Well, these are 2 Republicans, moderate Republicans, who have been willing to buck the White House before. And there might have been other Republicans who were interested in voting for the Democratic bill, but the White House urged all Republicans to vote no. And when the White House does that, Republicans are usually reluctant to cross the White House, especially on a bill that they can see the writing on the wall. It's not going anywhere. It's not going to be brought up in the Senate. The president says he's going to veto it. And so what you've got is both sides on the record saying don't support the other side's bill. And so how you set that aside and get into a negotiation between these 2 very different plans, the Republican plan and the Democratic plan, which have some similar goals, but they don't get there the same way. And you've got House Speaker Nancy Pelosi saying again today, there is no middle ground. If you've got one bill that bans chokeholds and one bill that doesn't ban chokeholds, what's the middle ground there? Is it that you ban some chokeholds in some states? So she argues that there's just no way to compromise with Republicans. She argues that, their bill is just meant to make it look like they're doing something on policing when they really don't want to. Republicans fire back that Democrats are being obstructionist. And so, you've got one of these classic Washington standoffs. And we are in an election year. We're about to hit the July 4th recess. Maybe the 2 sides will use that as a cooling off period. There are some conversations, bipartisan conversations, that have gone on behind the scenes, but nothing serious. And so right now, I really don't see how the 2 sides negotiate their way out of this standoff, especially, I should add, when Democrats look at the polling and they see the possibility now that they could retake control of the Senate in November. And you've got some Democrats who say, hey, why not wait until then? Maybe then we can push a bill in both the House and the Senate that we think does the job. Why should we compromise now?
Nancy, I want to ask you about something else. Earlier today, we talked to Weijia Jiang about the fact that the Trump administration is urging the Supreme Court to overturn the Affordable Care Act in its entirety in the middle of a pandemic. At the same time, the House is pursuing an enhancement bill.
Right.
What can you tell us about this?
I can tell you that the House wants to move very quickly on this. Nancy Pelosi wants to hold a vote perhaps before July 4th to expand subsidies under the Affordable Care Act so that more people can get Obamacare and at the same time enable Medicare to negotiate for drug prices, something that is broadly popular. Now, again, this is not going to go anywhere. The Senate is not going to take it up. The president would never approve it. But this is Democrats saying, hey, you want to fight over the future of the Affordable Care Act? Bring it on. Because Democrats believe that this issue was such a winning issue for them in 2018 that they won back the House of Representatives. Health care was far and away the #1 issue for voting Americans, and the Affordable Care Act is much more popular than it used to be. And polls even show that people are very worried about a loved one or an acquaintance losing their Obamacare coverage during this pandemic. So Democrats are eager to highlight this discrepancy between themselves and the White House. And I've talked to some Republicans who aren't sure why the White House is making this a fight at this particular time. They know what happened in the polls in 2018, and they're not eager to relive this fight in 2020, especially because the president has routinely promised that he's going to replace Obamacare with something better, but he's never really gotten around to explaining what that something better is or releasing legislation that would provide a clear replacement for it.
Yeah, and we saw evidence of that, Nancy, yesterday night when the president in that interview on Fox News was asked if he should be reelected, what would be a priority for the Trump administration. We didn't get an answer. So, we'll have to see what this all means ultimately. But at the end of the day, as you say, the Democrats perhaps see this as a moment for them to continue some of the accomplishments as far as they're concerned that they achieved in the midterm. So we'll see how it all plays out. To be continued. Nancy Cordes, as always, we appreciate it. Thank you, Nancy.
You're welcome.